What would you do if the man you were about to marry, the man you'd loved for 4 years, the man who got down on one knee in front of your entire family at Thanksgiving dinner, the man who helped you pick out flowers, and cake flavors, and bridesmaids' dresses? What would you do if you found out, 3 days before your wedding, that everything you thought you knew about him was a lie? Not a small lie. Not a, I forgot to mention an X, kind of lie. A lie so deep, so foundational, that it made you question every kiss, every whisper, every single moment you ever shared. This is the story of Monique Davis and the man she almost married, Terrence Michael Walker. And if you think you've heard messy stories before, sit down. Because this one is different. Before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button, tap that notification bell, and drop a comment down below, because I want to hear what you would have done in Monique's shoes. Trust me, by the end of this, you're going to have opinions. Let's get into it. Monique Davis grew up on the south side of Chicago. Her mama, Patricia, raised 4 kids by herself after Monique's father walked out when Monique was 7. Patricia worked 2 jobs, one at a hospital cafeteria during the day, one cleaning office buildings at night, just to keep the lights on and food on the table. She was the kind of woman who ironed her church clothes on Saturday night, braided her daughter's hair with precision and prayer, and told them every single day, "You are worthy of a man who loves you right. Don't you ever settle." Monique carried those words like scripture. She was smart. Graduated top of her class from high school, got a scholarship to the University of Illinois, and went on to get her MBA. By 27, she was working as a marketing director at a mid-sized firm in downtown Chicago, pulling in 6 figures, driving a white BMW, and living in a beautiful condo in the South Loop. She had everything together. Everything, except love. See, Monique had been through it. She'd dated Marcus in college, the basketball player who cheated on her with 2 different girls on campus. Then there was Devin, who was charming and attentive until she found out he had a whole other girlfriend in Indiana. And after Devin, she'd sworn off dating for a while. Focused on herself. Built her career. Stacked her savings. Got her mind right. And then, on a random Tuesday evening in October, she walked into a bookstore on Michigan Avenue, and bumped into Terrence Walker. Now, Terrence was fine. Let me paint this picture for you. 6'2", deep brown skin, perfectly lined beard, broad shoulders, and a smile that could melt steel. He was wearing a navy blue pea coat and reading a book by James Baldwin, and when Monique accidentally knocked into his arm reaching for a book on the shelf, he looked up at her with those dark brown eyes and said, "If you wanted my attention, you could have just said hello." She laughed. He laughed. And just like that, the conversation started. They talked for 2 hours in that bookstore. 2 hours. About everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their faith, their favorite movies. Terrence was from Atlanta originally but had moved to Chicago for work. He was a financial analyst at a consulting firm, well-spoken, well-read, and respectful in a way that Monique hadn't experienced before. He didn't try to get her number aggressively. He didn't make any slick comments about her body. He just talked to her like she was a person he genuinely wanted to know. At the end of the conversation, he handed her his business card and said, "If you ever want to continue this conversation over dinner, I'd be honored." Honored. That was the word he used. Monique waited 3 days, because she wasn't about to seem pressed, and then she called him. They went to dinner that Friday at a nice Italian spot in River North. He pulled out her chair. He asked her about her mother and actually listened when she talked. He didn't check his phone once. And at the end of the night, he walked her to her car, kissed her softly on the cheek, and said, "I had a wonderful time, Monique. I hope this is the first of many." Girl. She called her best friend Keisha before she even pulled out of the parking lot. "Keisha, I think I just met my husband." And for the next 4 years, it really did seem like that's exactly what Terrence was going to be. Now, listen. Every relationship has its ups and downs. But Monique and Terrence, they were that couple. You know the couple I'm talking about, the one that makes everyone else feel single even when they're in a relationship. The couple whose pictures on Instagram make you mutter under your breath, must be nice. Terrence was attentive. He remembered the little things. Her favorite flowers were sunflowers, she liked her coffee with oat milk and 2 sugars, and she hated when people were late. He was never late. He planned dates like events, surprise picnics by the lake, weekend trips to wineries, cooking dinner together with jazz playing in the background. He rubbed her feet after long days at work. He brought her soup when she was sick. He sat in the front row at church every Sunday next to her, holding her hand. Her family adored him. Patricia, who was notoriously hard to impress, pulled Monique aside after Terrence's first Thanksgiving with them and said, "Baby, that man has good eyes. Kind eyes. Don't let him go." Her sisters loved him. Her brother, Darnell, who had run off every boyfriend Monique ever brought home, actually liked Terrence. They watched football together. They went fishing. Darnell told Monique, "He's solid, sis. He's the one." And Terrence's family loved Monique too. His mother, Vivian, treated her like a daughter from day one. His father, Michael Sr., was quiet but warm, always shaking Monique's hand with both of his and saying, "You're a blessing to this family." Everything was perfect. At least, that's what Monique believed. Now, were there signs? In hindsight, Monique would say yes. There were small things, tiny, almost invisible things, that she explained away because the big picture was so beautiful. Terrence was never super physically aggressive. Monique had always been with men who couldn't keep their hands off her, and Terrence was different. He was affectionate, he held her, kissed her forehead, cuddled on the couch, but their intimate life was inconsistent. Some weeks, everything was fine. Other weeks, he'd say he was tired, or stressed about work, or just not in the mood. Monique told herself that was actually mature. That not every man was driven by physical desire. That Terrence loved her with his mind and his heart, and the physical stuff would ebb and flow like it does in any long-term relationship. There was also the matter of Terrence's best friend, Julian. Julian and Terrence had been friends since college. They went to Morehouse together. Julian was an architect in Chicago, tall, slender, well-dressed, with a quiet intensity about him. He and Terrence were close. Really close. They worked out together, sometimes 4 times a week. They had inside jokes. They'd disappear into deep conversation at parties, finishing each other's sentences. Monique liked Julian. He was kind to her. But sometimes, she noticed small things. The way Terrence's energy shifted when Julian walked into a room, brighter, more electric. The way they texted constantly, even late at night. Once, Monique reached for Terrence's phone to check the time, and he snatched it away so fast it startled her. "Sorry," he said, laughing it off. Reflex. She laughed too. And she let it go. Because why wouldn't she? This was Terrence. Her Terrence. The man who brought her mother flowers on her birthday. The man who whispered, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me," in the dark. The man who, at Thanksgiving dinner in front of 47 members of her family, got down on one knee with tears in his eyes and said, "Monique Patricia Davis, you have made me the happiest man alive. I want to spend the rest of my life loving you. Will you marry me?" She said yes through tears. Her mother screamed. Her sisters cried. Darnell stood up and clapped. The whole room erupted. It was the happiest moment of her life. The wedding was set for June 15th. They booked a gorgeous venue, an estate on the outskirts of the city with floor-to-ceiling windows, crystal chandeliers, and a garden that looked like something out of a fairy tale. 230 guests. A 12-piece live band. A custom Vera Wang dress that Monique's mother cried when she saw for the first time. Everything was planned down to the last detail. And then, 3 days before the wedding, everything fell apart. It was a Wednesday. June 12th. 3 days before the wedding. Monique had taken the week off work to handle last-minute preparations. She'd been running around all day, final fitting for her dress, confirming the florist, checking in with the caterer, picking up programs from the printer. She was exhausted but buzzing with that pre-wedding adrenaline. The nervous, beautiful, butterflies in your stomach energy of knowing that in 72 hours, she'd be walking down the aisle toward the man she loved. Terrence was supposed to be at work, but he told her that morning he might leave early because he had a headache. He kissed her goodbye and said, "3 more days, baby. 3 more days and you're officially mine." She smiled, kissed him back, and headed out. Around 4 o'clock, Monique realized she'd left her laptop charger at Terrence's apartment. They'd been splitting time between their two places, and she needed the charger to finalize some spreadsheets for the seating chart. She had a key, of course she did, so she figured she'd just swing by, grab it, and be on her way. She pulled up to his building. Parked. Took the elevator to the 7th floor. Put her key in the lock. And the moment she opened that door, her entire world shifted on its axis. She heard sounds coming from the bedroom. And not just any sounds. The kind of sounds that don't leave room for interpretation. The kind of sounds that you hear once and they scar themselves into your memory forever. Monique's heart started pounding. Her hands started shaking. Every instinct in her body told her to turn around, to leave, to pretend she hadn't heard what she just heard. But her feet carried her forward. Down the hallway. Past the kitchen. Past the living room where they'd cuddled 100 times. The bedroom door was cracked open. And there, in the bed she had slept in just 2 nights ago, was Terrence. With Julian. Let me just pause here and let that sit. Because I need you to understand the magnitude of what Monique was feeling in that moment. This wasn't just catching your fiancé cheating. That alone would be devastating. But this was layers. Layer upon layer of betrayal, confusion, shock, and grief hitting her all at the same time like a freight train. Monique said later that she doesn't even remember making a sound. But she must have, because both men suddenly stopped and looked toward the door. And when Terrence's eyes met hers, when he saw Monique standing there, frozen, her purse slipping from her shoulder, the look on his face told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't new. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was the truth. Monique, Terrence started, scrambling, reaching for clothes, his voice cracking. Monique, wait, please. It's not, I can explain. But what was there to explain? What words could he possibly string together that would unsee what she had just seen? Julian didn't say a word. He just sat there, his face a mask of guilt and something else, something that almost looked like relief. Like a man who'd been holding his breath for years and had finally been forced to exhale. Monique didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She didn't curse. She just looked at Terrence, this man she was supposed to marry in 3 days, and said 5 words that carried the weight of 4 years. How long has this been going on? Terrence was shaking. Actually shaking. He pulled on his pants, stumbling, his hands trembling so badly he could barely button them. Julian quietly got up and went to the bathroom, closing the door behind him. Monique, please, sit down. Let me talk to you. Please. How long? Terrence closed his eyes. And when he opened them, tears were streaming down his face. Since Morehouse, he whispered. Since Morehouse. Since college. That was over a decade. Over a decade of hiding. Over a decade of lying. The entire time Monique had known him, every date, every kiss, every "I love you," every plan for their future, Julian had been there. In the background. In the shadows. In the spaces Monique couldn't see. She felt her knees buckle. She grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. So our entire relationship, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, was a lie. Monique drove home in a fog. She doesn't remember the drive. Doesn't remember parking. Doesn't remember walking through her front door. She just remembers collapsing on her couch and staring at the ceiling, the room spinning around her, her custom wedding dress hanging on the back of her bedroom door like a ghost. Her phone was exploding. Terrence called 19 times. 19. He sent text after text after text. Please let me explain. I love you, Monique. I do. Please believe me. Don't throw away what we have. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She didn't respond to any of them. Instead, she called the one person she could always count on, Keisha. Keisha arrived in 20 minutes flat, still in her scrubs from her nursing shift, with a bottle of wine and a box of tissues. One look at Monique's face told her this was serious. "Mo, what happened? Is it the caterer? The florist? Girl, whatever it is, we can fix it." "He's gay, Keisha." Silence. Complete silence. "What?" "Terrence. He's been sleeping with Julian. Since college. I walked in on them today." Keisha sat down slowly, like her legs had given out beneath her. "Oh my God." And then Monique broke. She broke open like a dam, sobbing so hard her entire body convulsed. For years of love, for years of trust, for years of building something she believed was real, all of it crumbled in her hands like dust. Keisha held her for an hour. Didn't say a word. Just held her and rocked her like a mother rocking a child through a nightmare. When the tears finally slowed, the questions started. And with the questions came the anger. Was any of it real? Monique asked, pacing her living room, mascara streaked down her face. Was anything real? Did he ever actually love me? Or was I just a cover story? A costume he wore to make his family happy? Because that was the thing that ate at her most. Not just the cheating, but the deception. The calculated, deliberate, years-long deception. Terrence hadn't just hidden an affair. He'd hidden his entire identity. And he'd used Monique, used her love, her trust, her body, her time, to do it. Every memory she had was now contaminated. Every romantic dinner, was he thinking about Julian? Every night they were intimate, was he somewhere else in his mind? Every time he introduced her as his girlfriend, his fiancé, his future wife, was she just a prop in a performance? Keisha, to her credit, was careful with her words. She was angry too, furious, even, but she also understood the complexity of what they were dealing with. Listen to me. What he did to you is wrong. Dead wrong. Lying to you for 4 years, letting you plan a whole wedding, letting you fall in love with a version of him that isn't real, that is unforgivable. But I also want you to know, this isn't about you. This isn't because you weren't enough. This is about him and whatever war he's been fighting inside himself. Monique heard her. But in that moment, the nuance didn't matter. The pain was too raw. Thursday came. 2 days before the wedding. Monique hadn't slept. Her eyes were swollen, her head pounded, and every time she looked at her phone, there were more messages from Terrence, each one more desperate than the last. He'd also called Keisha, begging her to convince Monique to talk to him. Monique knew she needed to face him. Not for his sake, for hers. She needed answers. She needed to look him in the eye and understand why. Why he did this to her. They met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in Hyde Park. When Monique walked in, Terrence was already there, sitting in a corner booth. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot. He hadn't shaved. His hands were clasped together on the table like he was praying. When he saw her, he started to stand, but she held up her hand. "Don't." She sat down across from him. And for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Terrence began to talk. And what came out was a story that, in a different context, might have broken Monique's heart with compassion rather than betrayal. He told her about growing up in Atlanta. About his father, Michael Sr., a deacon in their church, a man's man, the kind of man who believed that masculinity was rigid and anything outside of it was sin. He told her about being 12 years old and realizing he was attracted to boys, and the terror, the absolute terror, that consumed him. He told her about praying every night for God to fix him. About going to a church counselor who told him he was possessed by demons. About his mother finding a note he'd written to a boy in his class and the beating his father gave him, the worst beating of his life, and the words his father said that scarred deeper than any belt. No son of mine will be that. You hear me? No son of mine. He told her about learning to hide. About building a version of himself that the world would accept, the athlete, the scholar, the charming, successful, God-fearing black man that everyone wanted him to be. He told her about meeting Julian at Morehouse and finally, for the first time, feeling like he could breathe. But even then, they hid. Because in their community, in their families, in their churches, being gay wasn't just frowned upon, it was a death sentence for your reputation, your relationships, your identity. And then he told her about meeting Monique. I wasn't using you, he said, tears running down his face. Monique, I swear to God, I wasn't using you. I love you. I genuinely love you. You're the most incredible woman I've ever known. When I'm with you, I feel safe. I feel good. I thought maybe if I loved you hard enough, if I committed to you fully enough, the other part of me would just go away. I thought marriage would fix it. I thought if I just pushed through, I could be the man everyone needed me to be. Monique listened. She listened to every word. And she felt two things simultaneously, deep, aching empathy for the boy Terrence had been, and a rage so hot it could melt glass toward the man he'd become. Terrence, she said, her voice steady but shaking, I hear you. I hear what you went through, and my heart breaks for that little boy. It does. But I am not your healing. I am not your hiding place. I am not a shield you get to hold up to protect yourself from the truth. You took 4 years of my life. You let me fall in love with you knowing you could never fully love me back. You let me plan a wedding, Terrence. You watched me try on dresses. You sat across from my mother and talked about grandchildren. You did all of that knowing you were living a lie. She was crying now, but her voice didn't waver. I deserved the truth. From the very beginning. I deserved to make a choice based on honesty. And you took that choice from me. Terrence broke down completely. Right there in that cafe, this 6'2" man sobbed into his hands like a child. And despite everything, despite the betrayal, the lies, the devastation, a part of Monique wanted to reach across the table and comfort him. That's how deep her love was. That's how good of a woman she was. But she didn't. Because she knew that if she touched him, if she softened even an inch, she might convince herself to stay. And she could not, would not, marry a man who wasn't free to love her completely. The wedding is off, Terrence. He looked up, panic in his eyes. Monique, please. It's off. And you need to be the one to tell your family why. She stood up, placed her engagement ring on the table, and walked out. And she did not look back. If you've never had to cancel a wedding 2 days before it's supposed to happen, let me tell you, it's its own special kind of hell. 230 guests had to be notified. The venue had to be called. The florist, the caterer, the band, the photographer, the officiant, every vendor had to be contacted. Deposits were lost. Plane tickets family members had bought were non-refundable. The cake, the beautiful, 4-tier, white and gold cake, had already been made and was sitting in a bakery cooler waiting for a celebration that would never come. And then there were the questions. Lord, the questions. Monique told her mother first. She drove to Patricia's house on the south side, sat at the kitchen table where she'd eaten 1,000 meals as a child, and told her everything. Patricia was silent for a long time. Then she got up, made 2 cups of tea, sat back down, and said, "Baby, I'm proud of you." Monique wasn't expecting that. Proud of me? Yes. Because a weaker woman would have walked down that aisle anyway. A weaker woman would have convinced herself she could fix him, change him, love it out of him. But you respected yourself enough to walk away. And that is the hardest, bravest thing a woman in love can do. Then Patricia cried. Not for Terrence, for her daughter. For the future Monique had envisioned that had just evaporated. For the grandchildren she'd imagined. For the pain her baby was in. Monique's sisters and brother rallied around her. Darnell was furious, the kind of quiet, dangerous fury that made Keisha and the sisters keep a close eye on him. He didn't make threats, but his jaw was locked tight, and he kept saying, I trusted him. I trusted him. The hardest calls were to the guests. Monique decided to keep the details private. She simply said, the wedding has been called off due to irreconcilable personal matters. We appreciate your love and support during this time. Some people accepted that. Others pushed. A few family members called Terrence directly, and when they couldn't get answers from him either, the rumors started. And in the black community, especially in church communities, rumors spread faster than wildfire. Within 48 hours, everyone knew. Or at least, everyone had a version of the story. Some versions were close to the truth. Others were wildly exaggerated. But the result was the same. Monique became the center of a storm she never asked for, and Terrence became a ghost. He stopped answering his phone. Stopped going to work. His social media went dark. Julian disappeared too. Deleted his Instagram. Blocked mutual friends. Vanished. And Monique was left standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces of a life she no longer recognized. The weeks after the cancelled wedding were the hardest of Monique's life. She went through all the stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression. Some days she was furious. She'd replay every lie, every moment of deception, and her blood would boil. Other days, she was heartbroken, not just for herself, but for Terrence. Because despite everything, she understood on some level the prison he'd been living in. She knew what it meant to grow up black in a community where certain truths were not allowed. She knew the weight of family expectations, church expectations, cultural expectations. She'd seen what those expectations did to people, how they bent them, broke them, forced them into shapes they were never meant to hold. But understanding didn't mean accepting. And it certainly didn't mean forgiving. Not yet. She threw herself into therapy. Found a black female therapist named Dr. Okafor who specialized in relationship trauma. And in that small office, week after week, Monique unpacked everything: the betrayal, the grief, the shame, the self-doubt. Because yes, there was shame. Even though she had done nothing wrong, Monique felt ashamed. She questioned herself. Was there something I should have seen? Was I stupid? Was I naive? Did people know and not tell me? That last question haunted her. She wondered if Keisha had ever suspected, if her sisters had ever whispered about it, if anyone in Terrence's family had known. Dr. Okafor helped her dismantle those thoughts one by one. Monique, you trusted a man who presented himself as trustworthy. That is not a flaw. That is not naivety. That is the natural, healthy response of a woman who loves openly and honestly. The failure here is not yours. The failure belongs to the person who exploited your trust. Those words saved her. Slowly, very slowly, Monique began to rebuild. She leaned into her work. She reconnected with friends she'd neglected during the relationship. She started journaling. She started running, something she'd never done before, and found that the rhythm of her feet on the pavement was the closest thing to meditation she'd ever experienced. She also had to deal with the public nature of her pain. People talked. At church, she could feel the eyes on her, the whispered conversations that stopped when she walked by. Some people were sympathetic. Others were cruel. One woman at church, a woman Monique had known her entire life, actually had the audacity to say, "Well, honey, maybe if you had been more attentive to his needs, he wouldn't have strayed." Monique looked at that woman, smiled politely, and said, "With all due respect, Mrs. Henderson, you don't know what you're talking about." And she kept walking. Her mother, as always, was her rock. Patricia checked on her every single day. Brought food. Sat with her in silence when words weren't enough. And one evening, about 2 months after the cancelled wedding, Patricia said something that shifted Monique's perspective entirely. "Baby, you know what I think? I think God loved you too much to let you walk into that marriage. I think he put you in that apartment at that exact time on that exact day because he was protecting you. You lost a fiancé, but you gained the truth. And the truth, even when it hurts like hell, is always a gift." 3 months after the cancelled wedding, Monique received a letter in the mail. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Terrence. She almost threw it away. Almost. But something made her open it. The letter was 6 pages long, handwritten, and it was clear that Terrence had poured his soul onto those pages. He started by apologizing. Not the desperate, panicked apologies from those frantic text messages. This was different. This was measured, honest, and raw. He told her that after the fallout, he'd hit rock bottom. He'd lost weight. Couldn't sleep. Started seeing a therapist. And for the first time in his entire life, at 33 years old, he'd said the words out loud to another human being in a safe space. "I'm gay." He wrote about how terrifying and liberating those 2 words were. How saying them felt like stepping off a cliff and finding solid ground at the bottom instead of the abyss he'd always imagined. He told her he'd come out to his mother. Vivian had cried, not tears of disappointment, but tears of grief for all the years her son had suffered in silence. She told him she loved him. She told him she'd always known, somewhere deep, but hadn't had the language or courage to broach it. His father, Michael Sr., had not taken it well. The conversation had ended with a door slamming and a silence that, as of the writing of the letter, had not yet been broken. He told her about Julian. About how Julian had begged him for years to be honest, with Monique, with his family, with himself. Julian had never wanted to be a secret. He'd been in love with Terrence since they were 19 years old and had watched the man he loved build a life with someone else, year after year, while their relationship existed in stolen moments and shadows. The engagement to Monique had devastated Julian, and their relationship had become increasingly strained in the months leading up to the wedding. What Monique walked in on that day was, in many ways, the pressure finally exploding. And then Terrence wrote the words that broke Monique open one final time. "Monique, I need you to know this, I loved you. I love you still. Not in the way a husband should love a wife, and I know now that what I was offering you was incomplete. It was selfish. It was unfair. You deserved a man who could give you all of himself, and I could never be that man. Not because of anything you lacked, but because of who I am. I spent my whole life trying to be someone I'm not, and you became collateral damage in that war. I will carry the guilt of that for the rest of my life. You are extraordinary. You are beautiful, brilliant, kind, and strong. And the man who gets to love you, truly love you, completely and without reservation, will be the luckiest man on earth. I just pray that one day, you'll forgive me. Not for my sake, but for yours. Because you deserve to be free of this weight. You deserve to move forward without carrying the burden of my brokenness. Thank you for loving me. I didn't deserve it, but it was the greatest gift I've ever received. Terrence." Monique read that letter 3 times. She cried through every reading. And then she folded it up, placed it in a box, and put the box on the top shelf of her closet. She didn't write back. Not because she was angry, though she was. And not because she didn't care, because she did. She didn't write back because she wasn't ready. And she gave herself permission to take all the time she needed. A year later, Monique was a different woman. Not broken. Not bitter. Different. Stronger. Clearer. More sure of herself and what she wanted than she'd ever been. She'd been promoted at work. She'd started volunteering with a mentorship program for young black women in Chicago. She'd deepened her friendships, mended old ones, and developed a relationship with herself that she'd never had before. She learned to be alone without being lonely. She learned that her worth was not tied to a man, a ring, or a wedding day. She also learned to hold two truths at the same time, that Terrence had wronged her deeply, and that Terrence was a victim of a culture that had made him feel like his truth was unacceptable. Both things were true. Neither canceled the other out. And that understanding, that nuance, was perhaps the greatest sign of her growth. She eventually did forgive Terrence. Not in a grand gesture or a dramatic conversation. She just woke up one morning, about 14 months after the canceled wedding, and realized that the weight was gone. The anger had burned itself out. The grief had softened into something quieter, gentler, a tender scar rather than an open wound. She didn't call him. She didn't write a letter. She just whispered it quietly to herself in her bathroom mirror one morning while getting ready for work. "I forgive you, Terrence. And I release us both." And she meant it. As for Terrence, through the grapevine, Monique learned that he'd moved back to Atlanta. He'd started attending an affirming church. He and Julian were together openly. He was in therapy. He was, by all accounts, finally living his truth. And Monique? Monique was living hers. Monique shared her story, anonymously at first, on a blog for black women navigating complex relationship trauma. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of women wrote to her. Some had experienced almost the exact same thing. Others had different stories but the same pain, the pain of being deceived by someone they trusted completely. She eventually went public, using her real name, because she decided she had nothing to be ashamed of. In an interview, she said something that I think is worth repeating here, because it captures the complexity of this story better than anything I could write. "I was angry at Terrence for a long time. And I had every right to be. He lied to me. He wasted years of my life. He let me plan a future that was built on a foundation of deception. That is not okay, and I will never say that it is. But I'm also angry at the world that made Terrence feel like he had to lie. I'm angry at the church that told a 12-year-old boy he was possessed by demons for being who he was. I'm angry at a culture that defines black masculinity so narrowly that men would rather destroy themselves, and the people who love them, than step outside the box. I'm angry at a society that forces people into closets and then acts surprised when the people inside those closets make desperate, destructive choices. Terrence was wrong for what he did to me. Full stop. But the system that created the conditions for his deception? That system is wrong too. And until we fix that, there will be more Moniques and more Terrences, caught in a cycle of pain that doesn't have to exist. I am not anti-Terrence. I am not anti-gay. I am anti-deception. I am anti-cowardice. And I am pro-truth. Always. Even when the truth is inconvenient, even when it's painful, even when it blows your life apart, the truth is always better than the alternative. Because at least with the truth, you can rebuild on solid ground. And that is Monique's story. Now let me be real with you for a second, because this is one of those stories where the comments could go 100 different directions, and I want to set something straight before I close out. This story is not an indictment of gay men. This story is not about demonizing anyone's sexuality. This is a story about honesty. About the devastation that happens when someone uses another person, knowingly, deliberately, to hide from themselves. And it's also a story about the impossible choices that a homophobic society forces people into. Terrence was a victim of the culture he grew up in. And Monique was a victim of Terrence's deception. Both things are true. We don't have to choose sides. We just have to learn from it. If you are someone who is hiding your truth, whoever you are, whatever your truth is, I want you to hear this: the temporary comfort of the closet is not worth the long-term destruction it causes. Not to you, and not to the people who love you. Your truth might be scary. It might cost you relationships. It might change everything. But it will also set you free. And the people who love you for who you really are, those are the only people worth keeping. And if you are someone who has been where Monique was, if you've been the person who was lied to, used, deceived by someone you trusted, I want you to hear this: it was not your fault. You are not stupid. You are not less than. You loved someone honestly, and that is never something to be ashamed of. Your healing is possible. Your future is bright. And the right person, the person who can love you with their whole, honest, complete self, is out there. Alright, family. That's the story. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Monique's shoes? Would you have been able to forgive Terrence? Do you think Terrence deserves sympathy, or no? Let's talk about it. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe. Hit that bell. I'll see you in the next one. Stay blessed. Stay honest. And stay true to yourself.